world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Tuesday, February 10th, as I am recording this. Now recording this again later at night than I would have liked. The day got away from me with work and everything else. It's probably going to end up being, unfortunately, into Wednesday before I get this posted. Now, I could have just skipped today's podcast, but with having missed a few days over the weekend, I thought it was important to get another one up, as well as the fact we've got a lot to talk about, because as I say every day, there's always a lot to talk about. And we are watching the fallout of a lot of things going on. Donald Trump is panicking right now. He's doing a lot of things. He's out saying a lot of things. And he's pushing, trying to make it seem like everything he is doing is great. Now, one of the things he was pushing was his ballroom. Now, he tore down the east wing of the ballroom or the east wing of the White House for the ballroom, I should say, without talking to anybody, without consulting anybody. The east wing was put up in the early 1900s. It was remodeled in the 1940s, and it stayed basically the same ever since. And Donald Trump goes out and decides we don't need that anymore. Instead, we need this big ballroom. He keeps talking about how, presidents have wanted a bigger ballroom for 150 years. And I realized I wasn't around for that whole 150 years. But I've been dealing with politics and listening to politics my entire adult life. And in fact, the only person out of all of the presidents that I've heard in my lifetime that has talked about a ballroom has been Donald Trump. And in fact, not even Donald Trump, both presidencies, just this time. This is all about his legacy and wanting to reshape things and make it better for himself. Now, why? Well, because I think he's aware, at least on some level, that his time is up, right? That his health isn't great. Whether he wants to admit it to the public or not, whether he wants to admit it to himself or not, he comes out and says things like, well, I'm as fit as I've ever been. I feel like I'm in my 20s. I'm mentally 20 years old, or whatever bullshit he is out there spreading, currently. He says all of these things. But then when it comes time, we go, what the fuck? We listen to him talk and we see how he walks and we see all these things and we go, you're not that healthy. He's trying to convince himself that he is better than he really is. And I think on some levels, he is very acutely aware of his own mortality. That's why he's doing things like wanting the ballroom. He put his name on the Kennedy Center. He wants to put his name on Penn Station and Dulles Airport and RFK Jr. Stadium, or RFK Stadium, not RFK Jr. Stadium. It was actually named for the better RFK, Bobby Kennedy Sr. He wants to build that triumphal arch, Arc de Triomphe, like what they have in Paris. It's all about legacy with Donald Trump, and he's afraid of coming up short. Now, there's no evidence that presidents for 150 years, at least none that I have seen, have been talking about a larger ballroom. I think it was a time frame he just pulled out of his ass, because that would have put it about 1870 that they wanted to build, a bigger ballroom. That would have been even before the East Wing was ever built. And when they built the East Wing, if they would have wanted a bigger ballroom than what they had, they would have built it. Plain and simple. He could have gotten what he wanted, which was a bigger ballroom, by remodeling the East Wing. But see, then it wouldn't be something new and shiny and gold plated, and it's going to be tacky if it is ever completed at all. Now, he was given remarks and he was talking about his this ballroom. First of all, he says it is ahead of schedule, and it's not. Realistically, they only have uh, everything demolitioned. They are doing some work on the bunker below the former East Wing, but they haven't even started anything construction wise when it comes to his ballroom. And there's a good chance it's not completed before the end of his term. Now, everything he is doing to the White House is trying to make it more and more like Mar-a-Lago, more and more like what he considers home. And for somebody that appears to be in later stage dementia, making things comfortable and similar does seem to be the norm, right? You want to keep them where they're, you move them to different surroundings and it gets awkward and it gets scary for them because they don't know what's going on. So making it out to at least appear like one of his gaudy golf clubs um, makes sense. He's like, oh, well, we should put a patio here. And I'm not saying that he is under full blown dementia because clearly he still knows he's the president and he has an idea of what's going on. But I think he wants to be around familiar surroundings, and putting in this ballroom is a way for him to help that. Now, uh, he says it's ahead of schedule. It's not. It's way behind schedule, and we don't even know if the courts are going to allow him to put up the ballroom. We don't know. Courts are looking at it. They are trying to decide. So far, they have not issued any sort of preliminary injunction saying no, you can't have the ballroom or no, you can't do this. Um, but they're skeptical of his authority to be able to build the ballroom. He thinks he's got unilateral control. He says it's all privately funded, yet we haven't had a lot of proof about any sort of private funding, that there is anything going on with when it comes to that it is not, um, you know, being funded by taxpayer money. So when it's all said and done, we're going to find out whether or not any uh, federal money was used for this. And if Congress never approved any money into a budget, people should be held accountable. Now, Donald Trump doesn't care about any of that. He thinks he's king and he can do whatever he wants and move money around however he wants because he's done that his whole life. He's constantly playing a shell game with money and moving things here, moving things there. Um, and he is just doing so he might have moved some money around, right? And if he's moved money around, that needs to be looked into because he's not supposed to be taking things that are appropriated for one venture by Congress. If Congress specifically says here's $1 billion to put toward national defense, for example, and he says, well, we're not making those purchases right now. We got enough stuff. We're going to instead spend that on the ballroom. That is not what Congress authorized. Congress has the power of the purse. So he's out touting his ballroom and he's talking about his ballroom, like I said. And one of the things he also said, besides saying that people wanted it for 150 years, again, he keeps going back to that. He said that from now on, inaugurations are going to be held in the ballroom. Wait a minute. He's not eligible to run again. And that's not typically where inaugurations are held. They're held outside. Um, you know, and they're open to the public and all this. He thinks the inauguration should be held inside. Now, maybe he meant the inaugural ball, because normally there is a ball event after. But also, he can't run. So he doesn't really get a say unless Congress passes a law requiring the inaugurations to be held in a certain location. There isn't there isn't anything established. There's some traditions on which side of the White House they hold the inauguration. I think now is it on the east side? I think I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if I got it backward. But either way, it doesn't entirely matter. There is one side that does the inauguration. That's where it's typically done. But there's nothing saying it has to be done. I mean, what is preventing the next president, who is probably going to be a Democrat, from coming in going, oh, well, I want to go ahead and I want to hold my inauguration, you know, at the National Archives and I want to swear in on the US Constitution. What's preventing them from doing that? Probably nothing other than tradition of doing it in other venues. See, Donald Trump wants to try to dictate what's going to happen when he's gone. And by saying that future inaugurations are going to happen at this ballroom, this is about setting up Donald Trump's legacy, like I was talking about, like how I think he knows he's not long for this world. Now, he thinks that if they constantly are holding inaugurations in the Donald Trump ballroom, that he's going to be talked about forever. What he doesn't understand is when he is gone, that they will ultimately probably rename that ballroom over, for somebody else if it's allowed to even stand. It may, if it is even completed, get torn down by the next administration and have the East Wing rebuilt like it was. Because we don't need that ballroom. We never needed it. This was all a vanity project for Donald Trump. Now, uh, but Donald Trump is worried about the future. Like I said, he's worried about his health. His health isn't good. And he's not the only one who has health problems. We're dealing with Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, as far as I know, is still in the hospital battling flu. Now, Mitch McConnell is not seeking re-election this year. His seat is up for grabs. Okay, he represents Kentucky. Well, Mitch McConnell, uh, if he passes away, which he might because he is, not in the best of health, at least it doesn't appear to be. He's glitched numerous times. Have you seen him glitch? They'll be talking and they'll ask him a question. He'll start and then all of a sudden his eyes will kind of fade out. He'll kind of have this faraway look like he has no idea where he's at. He'll kind of fake a smile and like he's still in control, but it seems weird. He's fallen multiple times. Um, it's looking like his health is struggling, and something like a flu or something worse, and maybe it is worse because he's still in the hospital with flu a week later, um, could be bad for somebody his age. So if he passes, what happens to his seat? Well, in Kentucky, it is actually up for a little bit of a debate. According to the Kentucky State Constitution, the governor gets to appoint a replacement until the end of the term or the next general election, whichever would potentially come first. But since the next election is this year, I think it would be the end of the term. I don't think there would be. I don't think the winner of the general election would fill that seat from then till January. I think whoever gets appointed would fill it. However, a few years ago, with the pushing from Mitch McConnell, Kentucky state Republicans, with their supermajority, passed a bill that got vetoed and then passed around the governor veto of Andy Beshear. This bill requires the governor to pick from a list of 3 names given to him by the uh, state Republicans in the legislature. And Andy Beshear at the time had said, well, the state constitution says I get to appoint the replacement. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So we're going to see what happens if Mitch McConnell doesn't make it, if Andy Beshear holds to it and appoints a Democrat, because the incumbency factor is going to play into the next election. Without Mitch McConnell in that seat, while it is still likely to be a Republican seat, um, if it becomes open and you have Andy Beshear having the ability to appoint a Democrat, having that incumbency could lead to where Kentucky could be a potential pickup for the Democrats. Now, as far as flipping the Senate in the midterms in 2026, Democrats need to pick up 4 seats. Okay, but I've said there could be at least 6 seats in play. You have Alaska could be in play. I can't think of her name. There's a very popular Democrat um, who could potentially flip that seat. It's possible. You have Texas, which Texas is a mess right now. You have James Cornyn, who is battling it out in a contentious primary right now, and it looks like he may get primaried out for Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton is an embattled, indicted um, attorney general for the state of Texas. The only reason he has not been charged or he has not been put on trial federally has been because he has been a sitting attorney general. I don't know what they are waiting for, but those two are battling it out for a primary spot. And then you have two rather popular Democrats in the state of Texas, and both are um, sitting very well in the polls. And I don't entirely trust polls. Polls have let us down, but they're sitting very well in those polls against either one. And if Ken Paxton wins, it increases the likelihood, in my mind, that Texas could flip. Now, even if Texas doesn't flip, as much as I want to see Jasmine Crockett back in Texas politics as a senator because she lost her House seat with the redistricting, she chose not to run again for that seat. As much as I want to see a Democrat win, there is something else that's in play with Texas, and that's money. Texas would normally be considered a Senate seat that isn't up for grabs. And if they're having to spend money to defend Texas, it is money that is not going to go into another race, potentially down in Georgia, where we need to keep uh, John Ossoff as the senator from Georgia. And that one could be a dogfight in order to keep him in that seat. So that could be money that would not be spent on a challenger. Now, depending on who they put up, if it's another clown like Herschel Walker, um, there's not really that big of a risk for Ossoff to be reelected, but we'll have to see. So I said Alaska, I said Texas. Well, Ohio, you have Sherrod Brown, who is running for the seat that he just lost 2 years ago. Well, he is running to be a senator again. He was just a senator, and now they are. The other seat is open, and he is trying to run to flip that seat. So when that happens, um, he potentially he's won before statewide. He's going to put pressure in Ohio. He could flip. You have North Carolina, where Roy Cooper, who is a very popular Democrat in North Carolina, he is a term limited governor, so he's going to run for Senate. Well, he could potentially win. And again, that would be a pickup. Okay. You have Maine, you have Susan Collins, an independent, not a Republican, but a Republican leaning independent, and who lately has been shown being more and more MAGA. In fact, she was at an Oval Office event here recently where she was holding a Make America Great Again hat or America's Great Again hat or something like that. It was a red Trump hat. Well, if she's truly an independent, that is going to turn off some of her independent voters. And if Graham Plattner ends up winning the Democratic nomination for uh, the Senate seat in Maine, he could potentially flip that seat again. And even if not, it's another seat where there is pressure. Then you go to Iowa, and Iowa could flip because there's no incumbent. And with as bad as things are getting here in Iowa, the Republicans are not gaining ground. So even though Iowa has been lately reliable Republican, it used to be purple. And Iowa used to be a swing state prior to Donald Trump. And I think Iowa could flip back and go blue, especially since there's no incumbent here in Iowa. I still haven't looked into the candidates. I was going to wait to see who actually came up as winner of the primary. But I think Iowa has got a chance at making some waves here, and becoming a blue state. But any of those, okay, we need four of those six. However, if something happens to Mitch McConnell and he doesn't make it, and there's a Democrat incumbent, that changes the math. That puts Kentucky in play as a potential defending state instead of a potential pickup, and adding in an incumbency, depending on who gets picked, if it is somebody very popular in Tennessee, well, there is a chance or not Tennessee, in Kentucky, rather, I should say. I don't know why I was thinking Tennessee, but if it's a very popular Kentucky Democrat, that could be somebody that's able to defend that seat. Then out of those six, we only need to pick up three. That once again changes the math for having uh, the ability to flip the Senate. And if we can flip the Senate, that is huge this midterm cycle. So we have to watch that, right? And we're going to see what happens to Mitch McConnell. Now, he may come through this just fine and nothing will happen. Um, and if it does, okay, Mitch McConnell's still going to be gone at the end of this term. He's done. And that's going to be good news for Democrats in the Senate. Mitch McConnell has been a very tough opponent, not just as somebody running for elections. He's another one of those that doesn't need to do a lot of campaigning. He gets put on the ballot and he wins. But because of how he ran the Senate as majority leader when he was in charge, he's been pulling strings behind the scenes. And Mitch McConnell is one of the people responsible for why we are where we are in this country right now. Now, why am I laying the blame at Mitch McConnell's feet? Well, it's because during the second Trump impeachment, that there was the question of whether or not they should vote out Donald Trump. And by the time the trial was over, Donald Trump's term was over. And he kind of came out very weakly and said, well, I think it's kind of a moot point. It is, his term's over. It's really up to the criminal justice system at this point to deal with Donald Trump. And he didn't rally the troops behind a conviction, because they could have convicted Donald Trump and they could have prevented him from ever running again. But they didn't choose to do that. He instead said, well, we'll let the criminal justice system handle it. And he wanted the DOJ to take it up. And then Biden appointed Merrick Garland, who Merrick Garland said, well, this is a political problem. I don't want to deal with it. And he didn't take it up until there was enough public outcry to take up things regarding January 6th. And that's when he did that. Now, they're both to blame. And beyond that, Mitch McConnell is also one of the people responsible for why we are where we are, because he held up Merrick Garland, coincidentally, from being appointed to a Supreme Court seat as a justice all the way back in February of 2016. He said February of 2016 was too close to an election year, that the voters should have a say when it comes to the Supreme Court, and that he wasn't going to hold a vote on any Supreme Court nominees until after the November election. Said it was too close. That, we are looking at 9 months later, 10 months later, too close. Well, so he stole a seat from that Barack Obama could have appointed a liberal leading judge. And Merrick Garland was not necessarily liberal. He was more moderate, because he had to pick a moderate because of the fact that the Republicans were in control of the Senate. So he appoints a moderate. But Mitch McConnell, and to an extent Chuck Grassley here in Iowa, who refused to also push for any sort of um, vote or a hearing or anything on that. They said They didn't do anything with it, and that seat sat vacant for those for almost a year until Donald Trump was sworn in, and that's how we got. It was, I think it was it Kavanaugh? It was Kavanaugh. Yeah, I think it was Kavanaugh first. Um, but then right before the election in 2020, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes away. And with 3 weeks to go to the election, suddenly the thought of being too close to the election was nowhere in Republican minds. They pushed through Amy Coney Barrett, and on one of the fastest tracks we have ever seen for a Supreme Court nominee. Now, by Republicans' own rules, not saying by the Constitution, but by things that Republicans had established, that seat should have been left open for Joe Biden. But they didn't do that. That's part of why we have that 6-3 conservative majority. If Merrick Garland had been put on the bench, we would have had a moderate. And if they would have followed the rules they put in place for uh, the seat that was vacated in 16 by Anton Scalia when he passed, they would have also had another seat open that Joe Biden would have had, and we would have had instead, uh, what would it have been? 5-4 liberal majority, something like that. If we would have followed the same, if they would have opened the one and let his pick go through, and I could have seen if they would have said, "Hey, we're 3 weeks away from the election. That is close," that would have made some sense. But no, that's not what they did. They pushed it through. So Merrick Garland, or not Merrick, well, Merrick Garland is partly responsible for Donald Trump and everything because he didn't prosecute after the second impeachment. But Mitch McConnell expected Merrick Garland to do something as head of the DOJ, and he didn't. They're both responsible for us being where we are. Now, tonight there was a vote in the House of Representatives, and this was on something, and this is a vote that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson was trying to push through. He went ahead with it anyway, even though it sounded like he knew he didn't have the votes to complete it. And this was on Donald Trump and his tariffs. Now, there was something already passed in the U.S. Senate 3 different times, 3 different bills, trying to end the national emergency Donald Trump declared on the tariffs. Okay. And it got over to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and Mike Johnson killed it. In part because he had a little bigger majority, he was able to pass a rule that basically said, well, we're not going to talk about it till January. We're not going to talk about ending Donald Trump's tariffs till January. And that deadline is coming up. So they were trying to vote to extend it. Now, this is a procedural vote they were taking. It was on language that would end up preventing Mike Johnson, or preventing the House from even taking up or holding a vote on this, and basically being able to talk about it. They were trying to prevent it all the way through till July. I've got the article pulled up here. It was a procedural vote. 3 Republicans crossed party lines to vote with Democrats. The 3 Republicans, Thomas Massie, Don Bacon, and Kevin Kiley. I don't know anything about Kevin Kiley. We know Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie was one of the ones who authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act. He was pushing for the release of the files. He has been kind of a staunch opponent of this administration on certain things. Now, just because he's been coming out against this administration does not make him a friend necessarily, but he could be potentially an ally for certain things. Now, Don Bacon is the representative from Omaha, and he is the one who we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, who had come out and had said that if Donald Trump used military force in Greenland, that they had the votes to impeach and remove him. And that kind of confirmed what I'd been suspecting for a while, that they would end up having, these discussions behind closed doors, and that at some point when they made the determination that it was time to move on, they were going to know ahead of time that they were going to remove him, that they had the votes, and that impeachment would happen in the House, and I think they would know they had the votes in the Senate to move on it. I have been saying that for a while. Well, Don Bacon was one of the ones who had been talking about that. So these three broke with Republicans, sided with Democrats, and with their current margins, they could only lose one vote. Republicans could. They lost three. Now, Don Bacon said in a statement that he doesn't like putting the important work of the House on pause, but Congress needs to be able to debate on tariffs. He basically said that they need to, that pausing these things and saying, well, we're not even going to discuss it till July is the wrong move, that they need to talk about it. He also went on to say tariffs have been a net negative for the economy and are a significant tax that Americans, consumers, manufacturers, and farmers are paying. Article 1 of the Constitution places authority over taxes and tariffs with Congress for a reason, but for too long we have handed the authority to the executive branch. It's time for Congress to reclaim that responsibility, he put on Twitter. We know that tariffs are a tax, right? They are paid by the consumer, they are paid by the importer. If Walmart brings in a case of maple syrup from Canada, when that hits the border, if there's a 50% tax, if that case of maple syrup ran $100 and there's a 50% tax, now they pay $100 to the person they bought it from, and they pay $50 to the government. And then at every step, that extra $50 keeps getting calculated in, and we ultimately pay more at the store. We know this. And the math, as far as what Donald Trump claims, he's claimed that we've brought in trillions and hundreds of billions and all this kind of money. We don't know how much money has actually been brought in because everybody in the administration who is out to give those kind of numbers are saying different things. So we don't even know how much has been brought in. But we're waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on the tariffs and as to whether or not they are legal. And like Representative Bacon said, the Constitution says Congress has tariff authority. So I'm expecting the Supreme Court to say Donald Trump cannot grant those tariffs. And they're going to peel that back. I think what they're trying to do, though, is figure out some way to weasel out through it that they can say, well, the tariffs are unconstitutional, but you don't have to pay it back. I really think that's what they're going for. They're looking for a way to cheat the system that way and do it both ways, right? That they don't have to pay back tariffs. They don't have to reimburse us for it. Now, Donald Trump has been wishy-washy on whether or not we are going to ever see this tariff dividend check. And I don't think it's ever going to happen. Congress would have to pass it. Now, he says he doesn't need Congress to do that. Of course, he is wrong because Congress must authorize all money. But he's been back and forth, and every time somebody brings up, well, when are we going to see those checks? Well, did I say we were going to do that? Oh, well, we could do that. Well, maybe by the end of the year. Like he's been kicking that can down the road for as long as he can because he knows every time he brings it up and says, well, they might be coming, that the people on his side of the aisle, his base, eats it up and they're going to cheer that he's doing something when he's in fact accomplished nothing. So we're going to see what Congress ultimately does with taking up this tariff idea. Now, like I said, there were 3 measures passed in the Senate trying to end the national emergencies Donald Trump has tried to use to put the tariffs on. Now, the House could take up these measures and hold votes. They could also get relegated to committee just because these three Republicans sided with all Democrats does not mean that they are going to pass uh, this resolution to prevent Donald Trump from having uh, tariff authority, right? So I don't know if it's going to be the Supreme Court. I don't know if it's going to be Congress, but this is a major loss passing this thing. It's a loss to Mike Johnson because he thought he was going to be able to pull it out. It's a rebuke to Donald Trump saying that, hey, we are looking into getting rid of your tariff authority. And when it's all said and done, um, we will have to see where Congress sits on this issue. Now, this could be one of the first breaking points with Congress, where they are separating from Donald Trump a little bit. They're, you know, testing the waters maybe to see how he reacts. Now, of course, Donald Trump is going to react very negatively. He's going to come out and talk about how important his tariffs are to the economic policies and everything else. However, what I'm thinking is going to happen, and I could be wrong here, is that they're testing the waters to see how he reacts and what happens as they start to slowly break. And you're going to see more and more Republicans do this on varying issues. Now, the Republicans are not united on a lot of things. So you have three this time. Maybe on the next thing it'll be four or five or whatever. Until they get to that point when they are ready to fully turn on Donald Trump. And when they make that move, when they fully turn on Donald Trump, it is going to be a dog pile. I've said it before. And I think what might happen is if they move to impeach him or something like that, that when they pass it in the House, it's gonna start like when they're voting on it, it's gonna be kind of wishy-washy till they get to that 218 number. And then you're gonna see just the yes votes come in, the yays, and it is going to be overwhelming. Not quite as bad, I don't think, as passing to release the Epstein files, but bad enough. Now, and I think then it'll go to the Senate and it will be pushed through. In that they would know that they have the votes to remove him, and they are going to want to do it quick, fast, and in a hurry. Now, one of Donald Trump's advisors, I believe, was talking about the jobs numbers, and they had to revise the numbers down again, and jobs numbers aren't looking good for this administration. Constantly losing jobs. Donald Trump is trying to reclassify a bunch of federal workers to make them easier to fire, um, and all of this kind of shit. Well, when the numbers aren't good already for the jobs report, and you're already saying, well, we barely gain jobs, or in some months we're losing jobs, and we can't even trust the jobs numbers coming out of this administration. We can't. Why? Because this administration fired the head of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics because they didn't like the numbers that were coming out and said, well, she's putting up bad numbers. They're doing the numbers wrong. Well, because the numbers made Donald Trump look bad, they're claiming that they're faulty numbers. And now, because this administration did that, we can't trust the numbers going forward that they have given us. But the numbers they have given us aren't great. So I just looked it up. Let's see. We have for January, they're talking about we only added 70,000 jobs. But in 4 years of the Biden administration, and this was coming back from the negative numbers that they started out with because of having to deal with everything with how Donald Trump left things because of COVID. Joe Biden added over 15 million. But the this is they only added 70,000. It's an increase from 50,000 in December, which is something, but it's not great. Those aren't stellar numbers by any means, and those do not reflect somebody who is supposed to be good for business and good for the economy. But Republicans like to tell us that they're so great for the economy. But Peter Navarro, White House senior counsel for trade and manufacturing, cautioned on Tuesday that the jobs report could come in even lower than expected because of sweeping deportations of immigrants working in the country illegally. He said, the jobs report is going to come out tomorrow. We have to revise our expectations down significantly for what a monthly job number should look like. He said on Fox News Business. Really? So you guys told us with immigration that you were going to be cracking down on the criminals. But yet everybody you're going after, you're getting a lot of them at their job. They're also not coming up to do some of the migrant work, doing some of the farm work, the seasonal work, things like that. So they're not filling roles. And we can't find what you guys would consider, what MAGA would consider Americans to fill those roles for the pay that was offered. Now, you keep saying that immigrants, or MAGA keeps saying that immigrants are taking our jobs. Well, clearly there's a disconnect here. Now he's saying, well, we have to revise what a monthly jobs report number should look like and lower our expectations because of deportations. That sounds like your policies are failing to me. If we have to lower our expectations, then clearly you're not building on the economy. But we were told yet again by a Republican administration that if we cut taxes and we give money to the rich people, that they would build jobs and that they would grow the economy. Well, gee, it's almost like that didn't work and that didn't happen. It's almost like you give rich people more money and they put it in a bank account and forget about it. Seems like that's what happened to me, is that they put money in a bank account and it never made its way back to the American people. And now they're saying, well, lower your expectations. It's not going to be great. The numbers aren't going to be good. But I thought Donald Trump was great for business. I thought Donald Trump was art of the deal and he was going to make America great again. Seems like we had better numbers under Joe Biden. Now, of course, MAGA is going to come out and they're going to say that the only reason Joe Biden had such high numbers of 15 million or whatever is that it was open borders and it was all undocumented immigrants, which isn't true. And even for the ones that were employed and working here illegally, what MAGA doesn't understand, and they will never understand because they don't want to understand, they are using it as a way to fuel their hatred, is that undocumented immigrants do not get any money out of the system. They are not eligible for they're not eligible for Medicaid. They're not eligible for food stamps. They're not eligible for daycare. The only federally uh, allotted money that they are eligible for when it comes to Medicaid is emergency room care. Is if they absolutely need some treatment and they go to the ER, and this applies to Americans too. This isn't something specifically for undocumented or illegal immigrants. Is anybody goes to the emergency room and you don't have the means to pay, they will at least determine what's wrong with you and make sure you are stable. And I know people who have abused that privilege. Um, and I know several policies I've had with jobs I've had that had emergency room writers. One policy I had with one of the first jobs where I got insurance had something like a $500 additional emergency room deductible, unless you were actually admitted to the hospital. So if you go to the ER and you get, and it doesn't matter, you could maybe fight it depending on what actually happened. But if you go into the ER and they didn't actually put you in a room overnight for observation or whatever and have you fully admitted and you were just in the ER, you had to pay an additional deductible. And it was because too many people were going to the ER and treating the ER like a primary care doctor. But beyond that, if I know people who have gone to the ER for non-emergency reasons and have come up with, well, I don't have health insurance, but I've got the flu, or I don't have health insurance, but I'm battling this chronic cold or whatever, and maybe it's bronchitis, I don't know. But I need relief. So they need to be seen by a doctor, but they can't afford to go to a walk-in clinic. They can't afford to go to um, a urgent care or a doctor's office because they don't have the insurance. If they go to the ER, they can get treated. And if they never pay, Medicare pays or Medicaid pays. That's the only benefit undocumented illegal immigrants get. But of course, Republicans and MAGA don't want to believe that. They want to believe that these people are working and draining the resources on society. But in actuality, they're not. Now, the other thing is, for a lot of them, if they are here working on forged paperwork, right? And this is one of the reasons why a lot of times the employed uh, immigrants get overlooked in the system is because they pay in, okay? They still have to have taxes deducted. They pay into Medicare. They pay into Social Security. They pay into your local taxes, your state taxes. They pay all of that if your state has state income tax. But because they're not here legally, they are not eligible to file a tax refund, which is important as we are getting into tax season to keep that in mind. So, as this is going on, they're paying into a system that they can't draw from, which only means that there is more revenue in the pot for us to pay on our bills, and they would never be able to file a tax refund or a tax return. Now, yes, in some cases, does that mean that they may potentially owe back taxes or additional taxes that we never saw? Yes, that is entirely possible. But on the other hand, there's a significant portion of them that would be normally due a refund, but because they are ineligible to file, they don't file. So they never get that money back, and it just goes on the federal government's bottom line, and it sits there waiting and waiting and waiting. Now, we could have discussions all day long about making our tax code better and fixing how filing works. And the fact of the matter that we don't have a better system is kind of bogus. I think that is something they should look at. The fact that we have to go at the end of the year and now get all of our forms together and submit everything and tell the government, hey, we filled it all out, and this is what we think you owe us back in our taxes, or this is how much additional we think we owe you, just for the government to come in later and say, nah, you owe us more, or you did this wrong, is ridiculous. There's got to be a better or in a simpler way to do this. Um, but I'm not the expert. I'm not the genius who's going to come up with a better system. I'm just saying what we have is a flawed system. But see, MAGA doesn't want to know that undocumented immigrants pay in all the time. They like their narrative that undocumented immigrants are a drain on society. They love that narrative. And they're going to keep spinning that narrative as long as they can, if they can get away from it, or if they can get away with it. Because there's at least a significant portion of this country that will believe it. This is why they were Republican lawmakers were able to pass cuts to Medicaid, cuts to food stamps and things on the back of this idea that, well, we're just cutting it for people who don't deserve it, who are here illegally, except they were never eligible. And we've talked about that at length. So what they really mean is that we're going to cut it. And now suddenly, people in red states who were getting this assistance before is going to have less assistance coming in. And that's going to matter. And I think it's going to make a difference in the elections. But see, these MAGA voters, they constantly believe that, well, I qualify for it. I've paid my taxes in. I need it or whatever. I should have access to it. But, so and so down the road, oh, well, they're just lazy. It's always a double standard with them. And if they think someone is here undocumented or illegally, they are going to complain about it, and they think that they are draining the resources. The other thing that they believe is that it's a pie, right? They think of government assistance or help or whatever like a pie, and that if you give more people more help, it cuts down the pieces, and you get a smaller piece. No, if we have more people on assistance, clearly, if we could offer them assistance, etc., and like I said, we can't because it's prohibited. Um, that it's just about making everybody on equal footing, but they don't want to see it that way. They think it's going to take something from them, and that is a very bizarre way to look at things. The last story I wanted to talk about quickly was the Gordie Howe Bridge, and you guys might have heard this. This is a bridge that will be spanning the Detroit River between Canada and Michigan. Now, construction began in 2018, and it was basically fully funded by Canada. And apparently, it is going to be jointly owned by Michigan and Canada. But Donald Trump wants ownership, effectively. He said, um, let's see, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Trump believes U.S. should own at least half the bridge, have shared authority over what passes across it, and participate in the economic benefits generated by U.S. use. Now, what does he mean by participate in the benefits? I have no idea. Because clearly, automatically, if stuff is going across the bridge, in trucking, for example, you're going to get the benefit. Whether that company, saves money in transportation or whatever, it's going to automatically generate benefit on both sides, and it's going to be fine. But why does he think that we deserve half? We didn't pay for it. But this is typical Donald Trump. How many times has he gotten contractors to build something for him? Then he stiffed them on the bill, takes them to court, holds it up, and is now, keeping it tied up. Yeah, they want shared authority and ownership of the new bridge, and this was after a direct call between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney. Uh, it says it will not open until Ottawa treats the United States with the fairness and respect we deserve. Donald Trump said on Truth Social earlier. And Donald Trump apparently is trying to block it from being opened. Now, how would he do that? I mean, he could potentially put Border Patrol at the border and basically close it right there on the bridge, maybe. Close it at the U.S. side. I'm not sure. But he is really pushing for this, and he blames Barack Obama for allowing it to happen. But construction began in 2018. Now, I'm not sure when talks and everything were established to get it done, but 2018, when construction began, was during Donald Trump's first term. He could have stopped it then. He could have made all of these arrangements then. But see, during his first term, he wasn't dealing with the mental health problems and the things that he's dealing with now. This is now him trying to just say, "Well, I want a taste. I want to share. I want to have some amount of control." Because everything is collapsing around him, he's not as willing to just let things go on. He wants to have control and try to push and try to assert the fact that he is still some kind of a tough guy. It's not working. He says on Truth Social, Donald Trump wrote, "The Canadian government expects me as president of the United States to permit them to just take advantage of America. I will not allow this bridge to open until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them." What did we give them? They paid for the damn bridge. What's he talking about? He also blamed Obama for the construction, for allowing it to go on without the use of any U.S. steel. Again, construction started during Donald Trump's first term. He could have prevented it. He could have done something then. But he wants to blame everybody else because that's what he does. So this is just typical Donald Trump. And on Monday, this was more of what he was talking about with Canada. He was talking about the tariff charges from Canada. The tariffs Canada charges us for dairy products have for many years been unacceptable. He was also talking about a trade deal between Canada and China. He said the trade deal was signed between Canada and China last month would eat Canada alive. He continued, the first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada and permanently eliminate the Stanley Cup. What? None of those things are even remotely possible. But this is just Donald Trump sundowning, having dementia problems, and he thinks he can throw anything out there, and at least a certain portion of this country is going to believe him. Donald Trump is delusional at this point, and I don't think the worst thing he is probably going to do is he's going to prevent this bridge from being open. There's no reason why the United States government should get to own half of something they didn't pay for unless they are willing to reimburse Canada for the cost because they paid for the bulk of the bridge, if not all of the bridge. I think they paid for all of it. So this is Donald Trump trying to bully and push Canada around to make it appear to be like he's tough. And this is another distraction from everything collapsing around him, distracting from the Epstein files, distracting from the bad economy, from job losses, and all of the things going on. This is typical Donald Trump. This is him spiraling out of control, and it's not going to ever improve. The craziness is going to continue until he is ultimately taken down, probably from within his own party, or it's going to happen after the midterms when the Democrats step in and they're back in control and they can at least prevent him from doing more damage. Or it's not going to stop until the Big Mac finally gets him and we finally get the one big beautiful obituary everybody is waiting to read. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow because there's going to be a lot more to talk about.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.